Thank you. I'm a neurosurgeon, and I went into the field of neurosurgery because I wanted to have a high impact and really affect patients' lives, and to do something to really change the outcome of so many of our terrible diseases that we deal with. The number one disease that I deal with are glioblastomas, which have a median survival, or at least when I started in my career, had a median survival of 9 months, and they hit people at their prime. So when I came to Johns Hopkins after my training, I really was motivated to make an impact on that disease. And I was discouraged a little bit by the fact that there had been no FDA-approved product in over 20 years in that field, and no real significant advances in decades. I sat at a similar symposium to this in 1986 when I was starting on the conflicts between industry and academics, and it was packed. The auditorium was filled with people at Hopkins, and the discussion was very vigorous until Dan Nathans stood up. And Dan Nathans, was a good friend of mine, but he had, at that point, just recently received the Nobel Prize for restriction enzymes, later became the president of Johns Hopkins University. And he just stood up and he said, look, there are two camps. There's academics and there's industry. You can't be in both camps. People have to choose. They're either on one side or the other. And basically, the symposium ended and everybody walked out because nobody wanted to try to overrule that and could deal with his authority. And I'll fast forward to 4 years ago when the new president of Johns Hopkins University, Ron Daniels, came into office, and he pulled me aside and he said, why is it that Johns Hopkins, as the #1 NIH-funded university, there's all this grants, all this innovation, and I keep hearing about you and gliadel as the example of where we've made a difference and we've really developed a new treatment that has received FDA approval. And what I told Ron Daniels was that we basically have two forces at Hopkins. We have the tremendous amount of innovation and drive to improve medicine by our physicians, our scientists, and it's reflected by the high NIH funding. It's a very entrepreneurial, innovative spirit. And then we have a legal team that is very dedicated to protecting the university and protecting the reputation of the university and the safety of patients and so on. And the conservative lawyers always win because you can't override that. They're being cautious and they see the dangers in everything that we try to do. And unless that balance shifts, then you don't move forward to benefit your neighbor and my patients. So let me take you very fast forward through the gliadel story. When I came to Hopkins, I began working with my friend Bob Langer, who I had worked with Judah Folkman's laboratory, and he had licensed a new polymer that could deliver chemotherapy directly to the brain. We were very fortunate to be funded by the NIH through an NCDDG, which is National Cooperative Drug Discovery Group, which mandated that industry be a partner, that it not just be academic centers, but that there be an industrial partner in the group that was funded, and we were funded well over $1 million a year. And Nova Pharmaceuticals was our partner in that. Make a long story short, we took that through the laboratory work, through FDA phase 1, phase 3 clinical trials, and through FDA approval. I was then very disappointed that once we had that, and I thought my job was done, that nobody would pay for it, especially Medicare, because there was an increased charge, and at that time, people, as they are today, were very concerned about the charges to patients. So we petitioned Medicare repeatedly. They rejected it repeatedly. And finally, the patient advocate groups petitioned Congress to get us a hearing with Mark McClellan, who was the director of CMS at the time. And he met with us for 45 minutes to discuss surgical innovation and how Medicare handles it. And the long and short of that is that they approved a new DRG, and that allowed it to be paid for and allowed other insurance to be paid for. And now it's out there for patients. When we looked at our data over the last 10 years, this median survival for patients with glioblastomas have doubled. It's over 20 months now as compared to 9 months when this started. So enormous efforts and obstacles that are overcome, but at the end, patients worldwide are benefiting from that. So it does happen, and it does happen effectively. When I look at Hopkins today, just two examples very quickly of where we are, where things have changed is an example is we're working with the Coulter Foundation, which gives us multi-millions of dollars to set up innovative groups of biomedical engineers working with clinicians and working with industry or with venture money to build up companies to deliver products to patients, particularly technology. And then also the Brain Science Institute, which is led by Barbara Schlusser, Sal Snyder, and others, which form contracts with pharmaceutical companies to harness the power of the research of an academic institution and work out a way of doing it with, patented, non-disclosed, secret. Their best products they're able to trust to an academic center to develop models and to develop for patients and do it in a way that will benefit patients. So I'm hopeful that people are building on these precedents and that there are ways to move forward despite the obstacles in the way of doing it. People are motivated more and more so to bring those better therapies to patients.
Thanks very much. And our last speaker is Alan Lichter from